First of all, what's your name?
My name's Taylor Armstrong.
Okay. And what office do you hold, Mr.
I'm
Armstrong?
currently a member of the Urbana City Schools Board of Education.
And how's that going for you?
It's going fine. It's going fine. I worked hard most of December, early January, kind of meeting with principals, administration, just getting a feel for the district. But first 100 days is going to be a bit of a learning curve, as I knew. So right now I'm just starting out slow, getting some bearings.
Have you attended I think they have kind of a boot camp for new
Yes. Yeah.
school board members.
Yeah.
So what's your takeaway from that?
That was fascinating. That was fascinating. A lot of it, didn't. It was kind of common sense, in my opinion. It might now. I say that because I work for the government.
You work already.
Yeah,
you're already in the legislative process.
I'm in a
and who do you work
similar
for?
sphere. So I work for Tim Barhorse, who's our state representative for 85th District, which has Champaign County, all of Shelby, and then like that southern half of Logan. So there's 99 districts.
So
averaging about, I want to say, 150,000 people each district.
Okay.
Is, I think, the makeup, or 100,000, one of the two. I forget the number. But yeah, 99.
Okay. And so what do you do for Mr. Barhorse?
I'm his legislative aide,
Okay.
which is a not so fancy title to an extent, but I manage legislative affairs, obviously, constituent district affairs. I schedule. I'm his scheduler. I'm his advisor.
How big of a staff?
It's typically just one paid legislative aide, and then the House itself, the House of Representatives, at the disposal of I guess our HR folks, help us get pages, interns, or even constituent aides if your member or boss is a chairman of a committee. So,
Okay. And Tim Barhorse, this is his second term?
he's running for his second term.
Running
yes.
for his second
Currently
term. So
in the
he
first.
terms out, and if he chooses to run, he's got, after this, he has 2 more terms.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. And so as a school board member, what was your biggest surprise after you got elected?
The biggest surprise, I think, I would say, our financial situation. And I say that not because it's dire, but because it's a little bit more, it's tighter than what I thought it would be. And obviously working with the state, I thought Cup Patterson, it being phased the second half, would help maybe alleviate some financial concerns that I knew were there a little bit, because we always hear the term, deficit spending per se. But I think we are much tighter financially than what I thought we were going into the board. So.
And that's all public information.
Yeah, that's public information. That's been made clear by Mandy, our treasurer at the school district, at board meetings, to the previous board and now to the current board. So, she's warned me, she's warned us, there's going to have to be some uncomfortable decisions that will have to be made, uncomfortable conversations. And frankly, I welcome that. I am, trust me, in my day-to-day job, how I get my paycheck are nothing but uncomfortable conversations about, public policy, how this affects that group of individuals, or how, this policy impacts the state.
Can you tell us what kind of uncomfortable things we got to think about?
Well, I mean, I think we're going to have to shave, most likely, some spending somewhere. I don't know where that is right now. And personally, the way I would go about things is I'm going to ask Mandy. I'm going to be like, give me a list of the top 5 or 10 things that we should cut or we should reduce, or that we should, I guess, keep at the current rate in terms of spending, and not necessarily increase spending. I don't know if that's something that happens too often or not.
So has this been a result of inflationary pressure?
I think it is, yeah. The pressure of that inflation is put on just remedial costs of the district they've stabilized, but they haven't gone down. So the prices that we're paying now have flatlined a little bit as we get closer to that 2%.
But the income hasn't grown.
But the bottom line hasn't increased. Or the increase that we have experienced isn't enough to still make up that gap that we're seeing right now, because we're seeing that increase.
Does the board have a consensus yet about?
I don't think so. Like I said, we're in early conversations. I'm a little frustrated about how, it seems like we go into a meeting, discuss these things, leave, and then we don't talk about them outside of, the meeting. Not to say that, we're violating sunshine law or anything. But me, I want to have, like, I'm an impatient guy. So I'm like, let's figure this out now. Let's start the conversation.
So what's the
now.
time frame then? When do we have to start making some decisions? Right
I,
now,
I would say,
in your opinion?
in my opinion, the earliest it would probably be November of this year if we're going to have to go to the voters and ask for something. I don't think an operating levy for new money would pass in November. And I've made this public. And it's not going to pass because right now the community, as proof into my election, as proof into Tyler's election, is not happy with the direction of the schools. They don't feel the schools are
What
doing.
What did you hear about not happy with the direction?
Academically, they're not. They don't feel like they're getting an ROI. So okay, that claim was made. I dug into the data. State of Ohio, and I've consulted with Mr. Thiel about this, is what do we use to measure the performance of our district? What data do we look at to say we're doing a good job, we're doing a bad job, we need to do better at this? And the metric that I was used was called the similar district comparison. Ohio Department of Education, or excuse me, the Department of Education Workforce now develops a list for each district, all 600 some odd districts in the state of Ohio, and puts them in a group of, say, I think it varies, but for us, there's 21 total, 20 other school districts.
So that's the school systems deciding. That's the government deciding. What are your constituents telling you, and what are some of the facts that they're citing? Is it anecdotal? How are you getting that feedback?
I would say it's
from the voters, from the people who put you in office.
50-50 anecdotal, and the other 50 saying that they've looked through the similar district comparisons. A lot of them cite the state report card and administration at the schools. And I don't think this is insular to just Urbana, but other school districts would argue that the school report card isn't necessarily to them as educators an accurate reflection of a school district. But my thing personally is, well, that's what people are looking at. So, either we have to educate people or make it clear to them and communicate to them that, hey, state report card's all fine and dandy, but we'd also like you to look at this as well. And I'm sure they would, but I don't think that effort's been made.
Are you hearing from parents, from people who consume the product, so to speak, from the school district?
A little bit. I think.
Or are you hearing from business people? What's your anecdotally? How do you divide? How do you trench that up?
I would say more business leaders, community leaders, and even as I call thought people who, these visionaries in our town that are helping behind the scenes, trying to move towards this new era of, dare I say, progress, but to revitalize, partake in the Renaissance. I think that's the great word that Mayor Bean's been using, the Renaissance that's happening in our community. They feel like the schools aren't being part of that right now. They're not being.
Is there a conversation ongoing between the schools and the school board, the school administration, and those people in the community that are those one-way conversations? Is that that communication taking place?
I think the only form of communication that is taking place, previous to when I was on the board and now that I'm on the board for how many weeks, how many days, is our athletic facilities working group, having the conversation between administration, the community, and then the board, since the board and the superintendent sit on this working group per se and have been for several years, about the future of our athletic facilities from an infrastructure perspective, frankly, from an operating perspective, and from a use perspective.
Okay, so we've talked about the surprise you had was our financial situation. We are now looking at a deficit for next year or out years. I don't know what that time frame is, but you said November. I don't know what that means, and I'm just asking questions for folks that are watching. So if we did put a levy on, you're not confident it would pass, so we're going to have to look at some reductions in spending?
I would argue this, and this is my strategy per se as an individual board member. I would much rather that the school district, in a sign of good faith to the community, do everything it can to tighten our belt so that when let's put it that way, when we have to go to the community to ask for operating dollars, to pay the bills, to pay our obligations, that we can at least have standing to say that we've tried everything we can, but there are things external to us that we can't control that are putting the pressure.
Are there rules and regulations from the state that are costing us money that need to be adjusted, that changed?
That's a good question. I think there are a lot of unfunded mandates. Obviously, the state of Ohio hands down to public school districts, but I don't think it's
with you
enough
being in the legislative
yeah.
end of it. There's a feedback
Yeah.
and a communication there.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of I don't know what the agenda is in the state,
Mm-hmm.
in the House of Representatives and the Senate, but is that on the agenda?
To reduce unfunded mandates per se? Not. I can't speak for all the other state representatives, all the state senators. I will say there is a sentiment in the legislature to address what are, to them, concerns of accountability amongst public school districts in the state of Ohio. Now, I am not saying that Urbana City Schools, West Liberty, Graham, Mechanicsburg, Triad, and even the other schools in our district that we represent, Logan County and Shelby County, are in that group, because they're not. The state of Ohio thinks that Urbana, Shelby County, Logan County, the schools on this side of the state are actually doing pretty well. I think they're more concerned with our inner city schools, the concerns that they have with their lack of accountability, let's put it that way, or their lack of performance.
Are they going into the schools and seeing for themselves what the situation is?
I have no clue.
Yeah.
I have no
So
clue.
the perspective of the teachers, they're a really, really key point of that.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from my point of view that the teachers that my children had,
Mm-hmm.
my last one just graduated,
Yep.
was outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing but good things to say about the school teachers that
Yep.
I had. So what's the component? How is their feedback loop being fed into?
Well, the
this
Ohio,
conversation?
the Ohio Education Association, OEA, is their advocacy group, and
Locally,
at the state level,
Yeah.
UACT, the Urbana Association of Classroom Teachers, is the local group, and I had a good conversation with UACT's leadership. It's a bargaining year this year. It's going to be more.
They know that the situation. They know they understand what the situation is.
Yeah, I would say they're pretty well versed in, obviously, the dynamics between
The
local
reason I'm
districts
going
and the
there is
state.
because, excuse me for interrupting, but
No, you're fine.
The reason I'm going there is because historically in businesses, the biggest cost you have, and historically
It's
an
payroll.
institution, is payroll.
Yeah.
So when we talk about that, obviously that's something that's going to be discussed.
Yeah, and that has, and to be completely honest, we haven't discussed exactly where we're going to need to tighten our belts. If a recommendation is made to the board by the treasurer, and I'm not doing that to throw me under the bus. This is just conversations that usually are had no matter what organization, no matter what entity you work for, when you're looking to reduce costs. If there are payroll reductions, if there are freezes, if there are cuts, and those are the recommendations, then we'll work through those.
How big is the delta between income and expenses?
I'm told
at a point in time.
I'm told it is. We're talking at most a month between not meeting our obligation and having enough just to cover, to break even.
And that starts in November.
Yes, towards the end of this year. I think Mandy wants to wait until what the tax payments were. I think those come out at the end of the month of this month. So we'll know by this month's board meeting what we're looking like, based upon what that will take us to the end of this year, I believe. Mr. Thiel is in the belief that will only buy us a couple months, which is fine, or a few months.
He's got a lot of experience with this. So,
right, absolutely. Yeah. So, and that's fine. I took that for face value, and I don't know if a few months means the rest of the year. I don't know if that means into next year, calendar year at least.
That's a significant amount of annualized is a significant amount of money.
Yeah. So, it'll be interesting. I think finance is going to be the top concern for the school board going into it, both from our athletic facilities project and.
How long have we been seeing that this delta is going to be happening?
I have heard rumblings of it for about a year now.
Okay.
About a year now, that we were getting close, if not entering deficit spending.
And we're in a situation with a lot of other school districts. Is that
Yeah.
an accurate statement?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, Graham, I think, is going to have an income tax levy on their ballot here in March. I know did Mechanicsburg's, I think, failed in November. I'm not privy to whether they're going to put something on for the voters in March. I know statewide, at least just working at the state to an extent, I have heard that multiple public schools, their levies failed across the state. Some of them passed, but quite a handful failed. So this is definitely not insular.
It's a tough one.
It is. It's one of the hardest situations. And I said this, Dave, when I ran, especially at the forum that UACT had. It is one of the toughest things that, as an organization in the public sphere, that you have to deal with, because you technically don't make profit. Everything you rake in, you have to make sure your bases are covered. And if you've got change left, you put it in your rainy day fund, or you put it back in your general revenue fund and figure out ways how to invest that properly, because you're dealing with taxpayer dollars, not necessarily the dollars that you make off of selling a product or a service. And when you need more money, you got to go to the same people who the dollars come from in the first place, the taxpayer. And they're going through it as well with property valuations, inflation, whether it be at the grocery store or at the gas pump. And at the end of the day, and this is once again my personal opinion, terrible economic policy from the top of our leadership in the federal government is the reason why we're in this position. And it goes to show people that the decision making that's made in Washington, as indirect as it might be, has real-time impacts on you and I and what we do for a living and what I'm doing with the Board of Education.
So that's a personal opinion.
It is a personal
We
opinion.
have to deal.
I mean, my big effort, as I've kind of alluded to, is that there's obviously a big gap between the community and our schools. And I'm hopeful. My goal is, at the end of this 4 years, that the bridges that have been burned, and I'm just going to put that out there. I'm not going to lay blame on anyone or anything for why that might be, but the bridges between the school and the community have been burned and destroyed. We need to rebuild those bridges in these next 4 years, at least in my time on the board. And I'm hopeful that we can, and it's going to start now. First 100 days are going to be crucial for me. So I want to try to establish like a quarterly meet and greet coffee town hall type of thing, and to highlight our local coffee shops or local businesses here in Urbana, and to provide the community an opportunity to come to me and maybe even some of my fellow board members to discuss about their issues or concerns, what we're doing good, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and what we're doing bad to an extent, because I think that needs to be restored again. And hopefully those little things are seeds that we can plant to grow and restore the bonds between our community and our school. And I continue to believe that we have a lot of work to do in that regard, regardless of whether people think things are fine now or things are bad to an extent. But I'm an open book. My contacts on the school district website. Please send me an email. Give me a phone call. My number's on there as well. The best part about this job is talking to people, because at the end of the day, that's who I represent. I don't represent the administration. I don't represent the teachers. I represent the students and the community. Not to say that we need to give support to our administration and to our teachers where due, but at the end of the day, I'm asking the community for their support, sending their kids to our schools at the end of the day.
Well, delighted to have you back, and
Absolutely.
welcome any other school board members, or for that matter, we've got a sheriff's race. Welcome, Mr. Burrows or Mr. Melvin.
Yeah.